We've completed the portion of Module 3 that addresses drugs and the driving skill. Now I'd like to move into the next segment of this module. And the discussion topic here is going to be a little bit different. Instead of talking about facts and information, it's become clearly apparent that getting arrested for driving under the influence is not a simple, fun thing. It can cause tremendous hardship, and it does have implications beyond just you, the individual, who's been arrested for driving under the influence. So in this section, we want to talk a little bit about, or talk a little more broadly about how your DUI arrest has affected others. And certainly family members would fit into that group of people who could be affected by your DUI arrest. Friends could be affected by your DUI arrest. Your employment, your job, your relationship with your job and your employer could be affected by a DUI arrest. And I recognize that as the individual who gets arrested for DUI, you really do bear the brunt of the consequences and the penalties of getting arrested for driving under the influence. But the circumstances that you find yourself in when you're dealing with those penalties, for example, just the cost of going through a DUI experience can have an impact on other members of the family. And so in this portion of this module, we're going to ask you to explore the impact of your DUI in a little more broad fashion, and think about how your DUI has affected other individuals, other situations that are taking place in your life. Simply, for example, losing the driving privilege. How are you getting from one place to another? We talked about DUI in the law. We talked about the severity of driving under the suspension. So I think it's important that we take a look in a more broad manner about how DUIs can affect different aspects of our life. For example, here are some things that can take place in relationship to family, employment, and friends. In terms of family, just thinking about the relationships. And how does it affect your relationship with a spouse or a significant other or a child? So for example, if you usually go to your children's events and you usually drive them, and now you only have, and maybe you have more than one child. Now you have only one driver in the family that can transport the kids. So how do you handle those kinds of situations? What about the time away from your family in going through the process of a DUI? Going to court, for example, having drug and alcohol assessments completed, completing educational courses, if necessary, maybe going into a treatment program. All of these take up your time, but they also take time away from your family members. Insurance is an interesting one. What's the impact of your DUI on your car insurance? Is that raised a burden in terms of the cost? Or maybe your insurance company is no longer going to cover you. So overall economic costs are also a factor that can affect the family. So instead of being able to go on a family vacation, you now have the cost of your arrests, the fines. If you use an attorney, you could have attorney fees that you have to pay for. So These are all things that can impact your family, and maybe you really haven't given some thought or consideration to those factors. What about your employment? Is your DUI arrest going to affect your job status? Because you lose your license, does that have the potential to make your employer think about keeping you on as an employee? Even if you can get an occupational limited license, which can help you out in this kind of a situation. But again, you're restricted with that occupational limited license. You can drive from your home to your job, from your job to your home. What if your employer expects you to be driving to other locations? That can create difficulty. What about relationships with coworkers? It's not uncommon that records of DUI arrest are put in the newspaper. So your DUI arrest gets listed under the police roundup section in your local newspaper, and your employer has read that, or your coworkers have read that. Certainly can be very embarrassing. Also, something to consider, what if your DUI is in violation of some of the policies at your workplace? For example, you were arrested for your DUI while you were using a company car. What could be the implication of that on your employment? And if you're a business person and you need to make a lot of sales contacts, what about your ability to continue to earn money? Could you experience a change in your wages, or a change in your ability to go out and do your job and earn the kind of money that you need necessarily to pay your bills? In terms of friends, you may lose friends as a result of driving under the influence. You may change the group of friends that you're interacting with because of social constraints associated with your DUI. A condition of your probation might be that you no longer drink alcohol while you're on probation. How are your friends going to respond to that? How are you going to handle that situation? So just a strain on the relationship with friends, and even possibility of having to rely on friends for transportation. This is a factor that certainly can put a strain on a relationship with your friends. So these are just some examples of a way a DUI can have a more broad effect in your life, and some of the individuals that can be affected by your DUI arrest. We're going to ask you then to take a little bit of time and think about specifically. I've given you some general examples. We're going to ask you to take a little bit of time and reflect on how your DUI arrest has affected others, significant others in your life. I'm sure you have a sense or a perception about how much a DUI arrest actually cost you in terms of dollars. And I'd like you to work on a little activity now where you're going to identify things like how much did you have to pay in fines, how much did you have to pay in evaluations, what did it cost for your evaluations, did you have to have an interlock ignition device placed on your car, are you losing wages, those kinds of things. What I'd like you to do is actually an economic cost assessment about how much your DUI actually cost you, how much you actually had to pay, and we're going to add that up and see if we can get an overall cost, money that you have spent directly as a result of your DUI. And then I'm going to ask you to think back a little bit to how many drinks you thought you had that night, and then calculate the based on the amount of money you had to spend on your DUI, how much each one of those individual drinks cost you. Also, I'd like you to think about costs associated with your DUI not related to money. Thinking about costs in a more broad sense. So for example, how did it affect your feelings and your relationships with other people? And one of the things that I'd like you to take a little bit of time now to think about and write down is you may have a spouse, you may have children. Think about the significant people in your life, maybe even your parents, and how your DUI arrest affected them. I'd like you to give some thought about the impact of your DUI on some of your friends and some of your associations that you interact with. How did your friends react to your DUI, and how did their reactions make you feel? So think about some of your close friends, people who became aware of your DUI, and how your DUI affected your relationship with them. Another consideration I would like you to make in terms of this ripple effect of getting arrested for driving under the influence is what has been the impact on your employment? How has it impacted your relationship with your coworkers, with management or people that you work for? Has there been some impact on the relationship that you've had with your job and the people that you work with? And I'd like you to write that down.
We realize it's difficult but necessary in this program to focus on the effects, the negative consequences of your DUI. But what are the positives that you're taking away with you from the experience? Some examples might involve increased awareness, the feeling of support, the focus on the family you may have felt since your DUI, or perhaps you've received some treatment for substance use that's helping you out. So please pause the program one more time and take 10 more minutes to write down some of your feelings on these issues. And please don't skimp on the effort, because it's very important for you, after getting through all of these negatives, to write your positives down.